Hello, my geeks and peeps, my explainers and entertainers, my little oodalollies. Right, so today we're diving into a very specific, honestly kind of wild type of trauma. And look, I know it sounds entirely like a joke, right up until you're the one sitting there, gripping your controller in absolute stunned silence. We're unpacking the concept of digital grief and the psychology behind why it actually legitimately hurts.
So you probably know the feeling. You talk about losing something in a video game, and your friends or family are just like, hey, it's just a game, calm down. Why are you crying over a bunch of zeros and ones? Well, if you've ever attempted what the gaming community calls a Pokémon Nuzlocke challenge, you know for an absolute fact that those simple pixels carry the weight of your actual soul. It's really not just lines of code, it's a full-on experience that triggers very real, very raw human emotion.
Think back to your childhood for a second. I remember the very first time I saw a game console at daycare. I honestly thought I was looking at literal magic, just this whole vibrant world trapped in a glowing box. But, well, that innocent magic has a bit of a dark side. The Nuzlocke Challenge takes this joyful, nostalgic gaming experience and basically transforms it into a dark psychological experiment. It's this whole phenomenon rooted entirely in kid logic that we willingly, almost instinctively apply to these little digital creatures.
To really get this, we gotta understand the parameters of this dark side. Here are the literal rules of engagement for a Nuzlocke. Rule 1, you can only catch the first encounter you see in any new area. That is it. No choosing your favorites. Rule 2, if your Pokémon faints in battle, it equals death. You literally have to release it or put it in a permanent graveyard box. And Rule 3, oh man, this is perhaps the most devious psychological trick of the whole shebang. You absolutely must give every single creature a nickname. By following these self-imposed rules, the game is structurally designed to force this incredibly deep human attachment right before ripping it away forever. So the crux of this whole thing is that forced psychological trap. The science of digital grief, if you will, starts the very millisecond you type out that mandatory nickname. Now, I know any parent will tell you that you aren't supposed to have a favorite child, but let's be real, in these games, we absolutely all do. That mandatory nickname sparks what we can essentially call favorite child syndrome. Suddenly, it is literally impossible not to form an unconditional bond with a bunch of pixels. Like maybe for some of you out there, it was a funny little blue gastrodon named Scoop, right? You named him, you raised him, he's yours. And the sheer terror of this experience, it really boils down to a single terrifying number. 1. As in, 1 hit point. When you deeply love your digital child like Scoop, you end up investing hours of intense anxiety, painstaking research, and careful damage calculations just to keep them safe. And why do we do this? Because you've probably watched them survive absolute disasters by the absolute skin of their teeth, just clinging to life on a single HP. That one represents this heart-stopping moment where your digital best friend almost crossed the rainbow bridge. And honestly, it just makes the bond even stronger. But then, the universe decides to be cruel. It sends out this bulky, weird enemy, let's say a Porygon 2, to take your favorite child away. One unexpected critical hit, and boom, Scoop is gone forever. No way to get him back. Your heart actually breaks in that moment. The whimsical fun of the game is instantly, completely replaced with actual sadness. And then, a blood-curdling thirst for revenge. You aren't just playing a colorful monster-catching game anymore, okay? You are a grieving warrior avenging a fallen comrade. But grief in this digital landscape comes in a few different flavors. And sometimes it's completely self-inflicted. Let's talk about the noble sacrifice. This is where the true guilt really sets in. Imagine you are backed into a corner by a powerful boss and you intentionally send out a lesser-loved Pokémon, maybe a little Shinx that you literally named Failure, just to buy enough turns to heal your real team. You give them this little mental salute for surrendering their life for the greater good, buying you the time you desperately needed. But man, making that choice, it leaves a mark on you for sure. And that guilt and grief feel incredibly heavy because of this stark exchange rate we're dealing with. On one side, you have real-world energy. We're talking about the very real hours of your actual finite life spent playing it safe and grinding, like mindlessly defeating 80 low-level Morels just to safely level up your team without risking their lives. And on the other side, the digital reward of keeping your virtual friends safe. This totally validates the deep human bonding experience because the time, the sweat, and the effort you're pouring into these pixels, that is real-world energy you can never, ever get back. Okay, let's fast forward to the emotional climax of the whole endeavor. Against all odds, you do it. You beat the game. You make it to the grand finale, the Hall of Fame. You are looking at the screen alongside the surviving true Mad Lads who made it across the finish line with you. And it should be a moment of pure triumph, right? But as you look at those 6 faces on the screen, a really harsh reality sets in. This final team is completely, fundamentally different from the optimistic team you started the journey with. And that brings us to this incredibly heavy realization. Reaching the end of the game often brings this sudden feeling of overwhelming guilt, because your victory, it isn't entirely clean. It's built entirely on the literal blood sacrifices of your fallen friends. You look at that celebratory Hall of Fame screen, and you honestly can't help but see the ghosts of those who didn't make it. Your beloved Onion, your loyal Squidward, your brave Blobby. Actually, scratch that. Brave Blobby was a legend. They took the hits so your surviving team could cross the finish line. So what does this all mean? What should you take away from all of this? Well, first, digital pets, just exactly like real ones, aren't in our lives forever. Second, the very real grief we've been talking about proves that incredibly real, potent emotions can and absolutely do stem from virtual loss. This mirrors the fleeting nature of our real-life attachments so perfectly. And finally, and perhaps most beautifully, I think, it teaches us that even when things inevitably come to an end, the time spent, the bonds formed, and the memories made, they were absolutely worth the trauma. Which leaves us with this final, provocative question to ponder. Even if the pixels fade, was the trauma worth the time? It's just such a fascinating lens to view our digital attachments through, isn't it? The bonds we form, whether they're made out of flesh and blood or zeros and ones, profoundly shape our emotional landscape. And they really teach us how to care for something outside of ourselves. Thank you so much for tuning in to this explainer. But for now, I gotta tune out. Bye!